breaking news in the Middle East. Hamas has announced it has agreed to a ceasefire agreement proposed by Egypt and Qatar. We're waiting to see if Israel will accept the deal as well. Beth Sanner is a former deputy director of national intelligence for us. She's joining us on the phone. So what's your reaction? Beth, let me just read to you a little bit from the statement that Hamas released. The statement said that Ismail Haniyeh, the head of the political bureau of Hamas, quote, made a phone call to the Qatari Prime Minister Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdul Rahman Al Thani and to the Egyptian Minister of Intelligence, Mr. Abbas Kamal, and informed them of Hamas's agreement to their proposal regarding a ceasefire agreement. What's your reaction, Beth?
Well, I think that first we have to hold our breath here, but I do think that the Israelis are likely to sign on, since this is the same terms, as far as we know, to what they had signed on earlier. So I'm actually pretty hopeful. I think that the military pressure and this idea that the Rafah operation was about to go forward may have made the difference.
The last framework proposal that we know about, Beth, had the release of 20 to 33 Israeli hostages over several weeks in exchange for a temporary ceasefire and the release of Palestinian prisoners being held by Israel. And that was supposed to result in a restoration of sustainable calm, during which the remaining hostages, captive Israeli soldiers, and the bodies of hostages would also be exchanged for the release of more Palestinian prisoners. That was an earlier proposal that was clearly discussed with both Qatar and Egypt. If that is the plan right now, and if Hamas has agreed to that, that would be a huge development.
An absolutely huge development. And I think that, part of the issue here is that Yahya Sinwar, who is, as far as we know, still holed up in southern Gaza, and the political leadership, Haniyeh, who is the one who said publicly that they were a go, they have trouble communicating. It's hard for them to do that, but also they're not completely on the same page. And they don't have the same interests in some ways, given that Sinwar, is potentially staring down the barrel of a gun, and also the party who wants to walk away from this and survive. So, it could be a very big deal. And I think that this delay may have been part of the discussion and trying to hear back from Sinwar inside of Gaza.
Beth, stand by. I want to go to Jeremy Diamond. He's joining us live from Jerusalem right now. Jeremy, has there been any reaction from the Israeli government to what Hamas has just announced?
Wolf, there has not yet, and so we are applying a lot of caveats to this news that is just breaking at this hour, and that is, Wolf, that we have now heard from Hamas in a statement that they posted to their Telegram channel saying that they have agreed to the proposal regarding a ceasefire agreement. Ismail Haniyeh, Hamas's political leader, speaking to the Qatari Prime Minister as well as the Egyptian intelligence chief to relay that message. But as you said, Wolf, we have yet to hear from the Israeli government officially. We have yet to hear from the Americans, from the Egyptians, from the Qataris. And so we do have to caveat this news, which does carry with it quite a bit of promise and hope here. Hope, of course, for the hundreds of thousands of people in Gaza who have endured unspeakable horrors over 7 months of war, as well as for the families of those hostages who remain captive in Gaza, who have hoped and prayed for the day that they will get to hold their loved ones in their arms once again. But what we do know, Wolf, is that there has been an Egyptian framework on the table over the course of the last week, which officials on all sides had a lot of hope that it could potentially bring these two sides together, in particular because Israel did make several key concessions, including allowing the unrestricted return of Palestinians to northern Gaza as part of this latest framework, something that they had resisted for some time and had been a major sticking point. This framework agreement that was on the table last week would see the release of some 20 to 33 Israeli hostages over several weeks of a ceasefire, and then ultimately leading to a longer-term ceasefire, perhaps a one-year ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. Israel had not agreed to every point in this framework, but it did have significant input in this framework as it was then presented to Hamas. We've watched, Wolf, over the last few days as that optimism around those negotiations had quickly soured. It appeared that Hamas was sticking to its demand that an end to the war altogether, that Israel commit to that as part of this agreement, something that Israel has refused to do. But now, hours after the Israeli military began dropping evacuation leaflets on eastern Rafah, ordering 100,000 civilians to flee, Hamas now putting in a statement hours later that they have agreed to this initial proposal. We don't know whether that evacuation order in Rafah was the key factor that changed Hamas's mind. We also don't know whether any major changes to this Egyptian framework have been made in order to get Hamas to agree to it. And like I said, we have yet to hear from all of the other parties involved. So as much as there is promise and hope in this statement from Hamas, there is certainly not certainty at this stage. Wolf.
Jeremy, I want you to stand by. MJ Lee, our White House correspondent, is getting more information, U.S. reaction. I take it, MJ, President Biden, had a phone conversation with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu earlier today. Is that right?
That's right. We know President Biden and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu spoke earlier today. And of course, these ongoing hostage deal negotiations was one of the many topics that the two leaders discussed, as has been the case for all of their recent phone conversations. But what we are waiting for right now is an official White House and U.S. reaction to this news that Hamas has apparently agreed to a temporary ceasefire deal. So we'll bring that to you whenever we have word of that. But I heard Jeremy in his last conversation with you really leaning into the various caveats that are at play here. And I do think that kind of a note of caution from here in Washington is wise as well. That is just to say that we have had moments like this before in the months of negotiations to get to a temporary ceasefire and hostages release deal where we appear to be on the brink of a deal, and other moments where we appear to be on the brink of these talks completely falling apart. So again, as we wait for official U.S. word and reaction from the Israeli side to this news from Hamas that they are agreeing to this deal, I do think, again, just leaning into that note of caution is definitely worth doing. But what U.S. officials have been doing, of course, in recent weeks is very much pushing hard for this deal to get done, because the administration believes that this is really the only clear way to eventually getting to an end to this war. But I can't underscore enough how important it is for U.S. officials to try to get to that point, to try to get to the point of hostages coming out and this conflict that has been going on for so many months to come to an end. And of course, a big part of that is avoiding a major Rafah incursion from taking place. And of course, the Israelis have been warning for weeks and weeks now that they are getting increasingly prepared to go ahead and take that step if this deal does not come together, Wolf.
Is the White House still planning a press briefing at the bottom of the hour in about 15 minutes or so from now, MJ?
Yeah, that press briefing has actually been pushed back to 2 o'clock. So that is when we will hear from National Security Council spokesperson John Kirby, and where we will get an opportunity to press him on all of these latest developments. And of course, we'll be bringing that to you as well, Wolf.